On December 12, 2001, Beverly Hills police let a stunned Winona Ryder out of Saks Fifth Avenue. Hands cuffed, cameras flashing. The charge: shoplifting more than $5,000 in designer goods. Within hours, the story devoured the news cycle. This wasn't a tabloid regular or reality star. It was Winona Ryder, the two-time Oscar nominee from The Age of Innocence and Little Women. The fragile, fierce heroine of the 1990s who had defined an era's idea of cool. The images were indelible. The short black coat, the flicker of disbelief, the sudden fall from a pedestal built on talent and mystique. In the months that followed, the trial turned surgical, dissecting security footage, price tags, and motives. Fans argued she didn't need the clothes. Critics said that was precisely the point. This was not about need. When the verdict came in 2002, the sentence included probation, community service, restitution, and counseling. The industry recoiled. Casting calls disappeared. A beloved leading lady became a punchline. A private unraveling became a public morality play. But was this the story of a thief, or of a woman crushed by fame, pain, and a culture, hungry for spectacle? And what would it take for her to step back into the light? Winona Laura Horowitz, later known to the world as Winona Ryder, was born on October 29, 1971, in Winona, Minnesota, the city that would inspire her stage name. Her parents, Michael Horowitz and Cindy Palmer, were intellectuals steeped in countercultural values. Michael was an author, editor, and archivist closely connected with the Beat generation, while Cindy worked as a video producer and editor. Their household was filled with books, political debate, and art rather than Hollywood glamour. When Winona was still a child, the family moved to a commune in Northern California, where electricity was scarce and entertainment came in the form of storytelling, literature, and film projected onto barn walls. It was there, under the glow of old movie reels, that Winona fell in love with cinema. Her parents' circle of friends included writers, musicians, and free thinkers, nurturing her creativity and reinforcing a worldview that was at once progressive and deeply unconventional. By her teenage years, the Horowitz family had settled in Petaluma, California, where Winona attended high school. Though naturally shy and bookish, she immersed herself in acting, encouraged by her parents to pursue the arts rather than conform. Winona's early experiences of feeling like an outsider, bullied for her eccentric style and love of literature, would later inform the vulnerable, offbeat characters she brought to the screen. Family support played a crucial role in her rise. Despite limited financial means, Michael and Cindy nurtured her ambitions, enrolling her in acting classes at the American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco. The contrast between her quiet, intellectual upbringing and the bright chaos of Hollywood gave Ryder a dual identity: the introspective thinker at home and the enigmatic star in public. Her childhood was not one of privilege, but of ideas, creativity, and rebellion against convention. That foundation made her uniquely equipped to embody the alienated misfits of the 1980s and 1990s. But it also left her ill-prepared for the unforgiving glare of scandal that would later define her darkest years. Winona Ryder's education was never just about classrooms. It was about performance, identity, and survival. At Petaluma High School, she was an outsider. With her thrift store fashion, love of classic literature, and quiet personality, Winona was bullied and often ostracized. But rather than conform, she leaned into her passions. She immersed herself in novels, J.D. Salinger, Sylvia Plath, J.D. Steele, and spent afternoons scribbling notes and rehearsing lines. Her parents, recognizing her creative spark, enrolled her at the American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco. At age 12, There, Winona honed her craft in acting classes, learning voice projection, movement, and the subtlety of screen performance. Teachers noticed her extraordinary presence. Though slight and shy, she radiated intensity on stage, with eyes that could project vulnerability and strength in the same glance. By the mid-1980s, casting directors had begun to take notice of this unusual teenager with striking features and undeniable talent. At 14, she auditioned for director David Seltzer and won a role in Lucas, 1986, a coming-of-age drama starring Corey Haim and Charlie Sheen. Though only a supporting role, it marked her film debut and revealed to audiences a performer who could steal scenes with minimal dialogue. Her breakout soon followed. In 1988, Tim Burton cast her as Lydia Dietz in Beetlejuice. The film became a cult classic, and Winona's portrayal of a morbid, goth teenager resonated with a generation of young outsiders. Suddenly, the bullied girl from Petaluma was a rising Hollywood star, hailed as both authentic and magnetic. Education for Winona wasn't about diplomas. It was about learning through roles. Each performance became a lesson, each set a classroom. By her late teens, she had already graduated into stardom, navigating scripts and studios instead of textbooks. Yet, as she moved deeper into the industry, the shy intellectual who once projected films on a barn wall was colliding with a Hollywood machine eager to commodify her vulnerability. By the late 1980s, Winona Ryder had become more than a promising actress. She was the face of a generation in search of authenticity. After her breakout in Beetlejuice, 1988, she quickly transitioned from cult favorite to leading lady, embodying characters that mirrored her own mix of fragility and quiet rebellion. Her next milestone came with Heathers, 1989, a dark teen comedy that skewered the glossy, sanitized high school movies of the era. Playing Veronica Sawyer, a sardonic teenager entangled in a murderous clique, Ryder delivered a performance that made her the patron saint of outsiders. The film was not a mainstream hit upon release, but it became a cult classic, solidifying Winona as a cultural icon for those who didn't fit into Hollywood's cookie-cutter molds. Then came Edward Scissorhands, 1990, Tim Burton's gothic fairy tale that paired Ryder with Johnny Depp. As Kim Boggs, the blonde cheerleader who falls in love with the gentle misfit Edward, Ryder showed emotional range that resonated globally. The film was both a box office success and a romantic tragedy, and her off-screen relationship with Depp turned them into one of Hollywood's most famous young couples. For millions of fans, Winona became the very definition of ethereal beauty mixed with emotional depth. The 1990s cemented her status as one of the decade's brightest stars. Ryder starred in Mermaids, 1990, opposite Cher, earning a Golden Globe nomination. She worked with Martin Scorsese in The Age of Innocence, 1993, a role that won her another Golden Globe. In Reality Bites, 1994, she captured the angst and cynicism of Generation X, her portrayal of Lelena Pierce making her a voice of authenticity for disillusioned youth. One of her most celebrated roles came with Little Women, 1994, where she played Jo March, the fiercely independent writer in Louisa May Alcott's classic tale. The performance earned her an Academy Award nomination for Best Actress and further elevated her as both a critical and box office draw. By the mid-1990s, Winona Ryder was everywhere: magazine covers, red carpets, award shows. She was hailed as both a serious actress and a fashion icon, inspiring designers and fans alike with her distinctive blend of bohemian chic and old Hollywood elegance. She was a muse for filmmakers, a darling of critics, and one of the rare stars who could balance mainstream appeal with indie credibility. But success carried weight. Winona's shy, introverted personality struggled under the relentless scrutiny of fame. Her relationship with Johnny Depp, marked by the infamous Winona Forever tattoo, was followed obsessively by tabloids, and its eventual breakup in 1993 was as public as their romance. The pressure of constant exposure, combined with personal struggles with anxiety and depression, began to erode her carefully constructed public image. At her peak, Ryder had become more than just a movie star. She was a cultural touchstone, the girl who embodied misfits, the woman who spoke to Gen X's disillusionment, the actress whose career seemed destined for timeless greatness. But even as she reached those heights, the seeds of her fall were quietly being sown. Hollywood, always eager to crown its next icon, was just as ready to watch one stumble. If Winona Ryder's career made her a cultural icon of the 1990s, her love life cemented her as one of the most scrutinized stars of her generation. The roles she played, fragile outsiders, rebellious dreamers, fiercely independent women, seemed to blur into her personal life, making her romantic relationships constant fodder for tabloids. Her most famous romance began in 1989 on the set of Great Balls of Fire. At just 18 years old, Winona met 26-year-old Johnny Depp, then an emerging heartthrob. Their whirlwind romance quickly became one of Hollywood's most celebrated love stories. Depp famously tattooed Winona Forever on his arm, a gesture that crystallized them as the ultimate young couple of the era. They appeared inseparable at premieres and red carpets, embodying the gothic romantic aesthetic of the early 90s. Yet the pressures of fame, paparazzi obsession, and their own youth eventually took a toll. The couple split in 1993, and Depp later altered his tattoo to read "Wino Forever." For Winona, the breakup was devastating, leading to what she described as one of the darkest periods of her life. After Depp, Ryder's romantic life remained under constant observation. She dated Dave Pirner, the lead singer of Soul Asylum, during the mid-1990s, a pairing that blended Hollywood glamour with alternative rock cool. Later, she was linked to Matt Damon from 1997 to 2000, a relationship that, while less fiery than her time with Depp, kept her firmly in the spotlight. Friends described her bond with Damon as genuine and stabilizing. But ultimately, it too ended quietly. Throughout the 1990s, Ryder's personal relationships were treated less like private affairs and more like public theater. The tabloids crafted narratives around her romances, painting her alternately as the innocent ingenue, the heartbroken lover, or the fragile starlet on the edge. Every breakup, every rumored fling was dissected and projected onto the roles she played. Unlike many of her contemporaries, Winona never married. Her hesitation toward matrimony was often speculated about in the press, but those close to her suggested that Ryder's introverted nature and her struggles with anxiety made her wary of binding commitments under the glare of public scrutiny. Still, love was always a defining part of her public persona. Fans who adored her vulnerability on screen projected the same onto her off-screen, turning her relationships into emotional touchstones. When she was happy, she symbolized hope. When she was heartbroken, she embodied the pain of a generation. By the time the 2000s arrived, Ryder's romantic life had already been exhaustively chronicled. The innocence of her early years with Johnny Depp stood in stark contrast to the media circus that would later surround her 2001 shoplifting scandal. Her love life, once her most enchanting feature, became another thread in the larger narrative of a star whose public and private selves were constantly at odds. For Winona, romance was never just personal. It was a mirror of her fame, reflecting both her greatest joys and her deepest struggles. On December 12, 2001, the unthinkable happened. Winona Ryder, the beloved actress of Beetlejuice, Edward Scissorhands, and Little Women, was arrested at Saks Fifth Avenue in Beverly Hills. Security guards accused her of shoplifting more than $5,000 worth of designer clothing and accessories, including items from Gucci and Marc Jacobs. For a woman whose fortune was estimated in the millions, the crime seemed baffling. The images shocked the world. Winona, handcuffed and visibly shaken, was escorted out of the luxury department store as paparazzi cameras captured every angle. The media frenzy was instantaneous. Tabloids plastered her mugshot on front pages, and late-night comedians turned her into a punchline. America's sweetheart turned thief became the dominant narrative, overshadowing her years of acclaimed performances. The trial of 2002 was treated less like a legal proceeding and more like a public spectacle. Prosecutors presented surveillance footage of Ryder cutting tags and placing items in her shopping bag. They argued that she had deliberately stolen the goods, while her defense claimed she had been researching a role and that the incident was blown out of proportion. The press devoured every detail, from courtroom sketches to Ryder's wardrobe choices at trial. Ultimately, Ryder was convicted of grand theft, vandalism, and shoplifting, though she was acquitted of burglary charges. The sentence was humiliating for a star of her stature: 3 years probation, 480 hours of community service, $3,700 in fines. And in order to pay restitution to Saks Fifth Avenue. More than the punishment, the conviction shattered her public image. Hollywood, notoriously unforgiving, turned its back. Casting calls dried up. Directors who once clamored to work with her suddenly looked elsewhere. What made the scandal so compelling and so cruel was its contrast. Winona Ryder was not some fading starlet desperate for attention. She was an Oscar-nominated actress at the height of her career. Her fall from grace played perfectly into a cultural narrative that delighted in tearing down icons, especially women, for the entertainment of the masses. Behind the scenes, Ryder was struggling. In interviews years later, she admitted she had been battling severe anxiety, depression, and dependence on prescription painkillers at the time. The shoplifting, she suggested, was less about theft and more about self-destruction, a cry for help from someone overwhelmed by fame and personal demons. But in 2001, little sympathy was offered. Mental health was rarely discussed in Hollywood, and Ryder was framed simply as a spoiled celebrity caught stealing for thrills. The timing could not have been worse. The early 2000s were an era of relentless tabloid culture, where stars like Britney Spears, Paris Hilton, and Lindsay Lohan were stalked, shamed, and commodified for their breakdowns. Ryder's scandal arrived just as paparazzi and gossip blogs were reaching their peak, making her one of the first major actresses of her generation to be publicly devoured by the scandal machine. For nearly a decade after the arrest, Ryder's career was effectively in limbo. Occasional supporting roles and indie films reminded audiences of her talent, but she was no longer the leading lady of the 1990s. The shoplifting scandal had defined her, eclipsing everything else. She went from muse to cautionary tale, her name shorthand for Hollywood downfall. The 2001 Saks theft was more than just a criminal case. It was a cultural turning point. It revealed how quickly a beloved star could be recast as a villain, how merciless Hollywood could be to its icons, and how the pressures of fame could combust in public spectacle. For Winona Ryder, it was the lowest point in a career that had once seemed destined for timeless greatness. The fallout from the 2001 shoplifting scandal was devastating. Practically overnight, Winona Ryder's career collapsed. Casting directors, once eager to work with her, hesitated. Studios no longer viewed her as a safe investment. The same media that had crowned her the face of a generation now labeled her a cautionary tale. By the early 2000s, Ryder was no longer the ingenue of Little Women or the muse of Tim Burton. She was the disgraced actress who stole from Saks Fifth Avenue. The consequences were both personal and professional. Ryder retreated from Hollywood, rarely appearing in films. For nearly a decade, she battled depression and sought treatment for her dependence on prescription medication, later describing that period as one of survival rather than living. For a time, she seemed to embody the fate of many child stars, immense talent undone by the relentless pressures of fame. Yet even in exile, Ryder's talent could not be erased. She resurfaced in smaller roles that hinted at her enduring magnetism. In 2006, she appeared in Richard Linklater's experimental A Scanner Darkly, alongside Keanu Reeves and Robert Downey Jr. Critics noted that while her screen time was limited, her presence still carried the same mixture of fragility and intensity that had made her a star. Her first significant step toward a comeback arrived with Darren Aronofsky's psychological thriller Black Swan, 2010. Cast as Beth McIntyre, the aging ballerina replaced by Natalie Portman's rising star, Ryder's role was both symbolic and self-referential. Audiences and critics alike drew parallels between Beth's fall from grace and Ryder's own career trajectory. Her performance was haunting, raw, and self-aware, reminding Hollywood that she had lost none of her dramatic power. But it was television, not film, that finally restored Winona Ryder's place in popular culture. In 2016, she took on the role of Joyce Byers in Netflix's Stranger Things. As the frantic mother searching for her missing son in the supernatural mystery series, Ryder delivered a performance that was both unhinged and deeply empathetic. The show became a cultural phenomenon, and Ryder, now in her 40s, found herself embraced by a new generation of fans. For younger viewers, she was Joyce Byers. For older fans, she was the long-awaited return of an icon. The success of Stranger Things proved that Ryder's career was not only salvageable, but capable of reinvention. No longer the ingenue or tabloid cautionary tale, she had matured into a respected actress who could anchor one of the biggest shows of the decade. Her comeback was hailed in the press as one of Hollywood's most satisfying redemption arcs. Winona's attempted return also sparked a re-evaluation of her scandal. In an era more attuned to conversations about mental health, addiction, and the brutality of paparazzi culture, many began to view the shoplifting incident less as a crime and more as a symptom of a young woman cracking under immense pressure. What had once been treated as a moral failing was increasingly seen as a human one. By the mid-2010s, Winona Ryder had transitioned from pariah to survivor, her career a testament to resilience. The consequences of her scandal had been severe, but her comeback proved that Hollywood, while merciless, could sometimes forgive, and audiences, more than anyone, were ready to welcome her back. Today, Winona Ryder stands as both a survivor of Hollywood's cruelty and a symbol of its capacity for second chances. Now in her 50s, she has reclaimed her place in the industry not as the ingenue of the 1990s, but as a seasoned actress who has weathered storms few could endure. Her role in Stranger Things, 2016, present, has been the cornerstone of this rebirth. As Joyce Byers, The determined and deeply empathetic mother, Ryder infused the character with authenticity that resonated with both longtime fans and new viewers. The show's global success restored her to the cultural spotlight, earning critical acclaim and introducing her to a generation that knew nothing of the Saks scandal. For them, she is not the fallen star of tabloids past, but the strong, complex heroine of Netflix's biggest hit. Off-screen, Ryder has embraced a quieter, more private life. She continues to avoid the relentless Hollywood party circuit that once overwhelmed her, preferring the company of close friends and her longtime partner, fashion designer Scott McKinley-Hahn. In interviews, she has spoken candidly about her struggles with anxiety, depression, and the pressures of early fame, framing her story not as one of disgrace, but of survival. Yet her legacy remains complicated. For some, the memory of her 2001 arrest will always linger, a reminder of how quickly icons can fall. For others, her redemption is more powerful, proof that vulnerability, honesty, and perseverance can outlast scandal. Ryder herself has chosen not to erase the past, but to live with it, acknowledging the mistakes while refusing to be defined solely by them. As Hollywood continues to wrestle with questions of forgiveness and reinvention, Winona Ryder's story remains open-ended. She is no longer the fragile young starlet, nor the disgraced tabloid headline. She is an artist who has endured, evolved, and reclaimed her place on her own terms. Whether her future holds more starring roles or a gradual retreat into privacy, one truth is clear. Winona Ryder is still here, still working, and still captivating.